Hey, Slater here, and today we're ranking Tyler, the Creator's discography. Tyler's one of those artists who everyone in my generation is aware of, whether you're a super fan of his music or you know him from his younger days.
I'll whoop your ass. Your girlfriend look like my mom.
In the fucking man rule book, no man should ever dip anything in another man's barbecue sauce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dipset Bird Gang, nigga.
Jewels, dip, dip, Santana, set, Woody, grip,
Yeah, but Tyler's one of my favorite musicians of all time though. I love his contributions to hip hop, and his obsession with music is one of the most awe-inspiring things I love about him. And of course, he's the inspiration for my online name, Slater, a track off of his album, Wolf. While starting his career a young teenager oozing with angst and saying a bunch of wild stuff and doing whatever he wanted, he eventually became a more polished, mature, and well-rounded musician. He's also one of those do-it-all types of music where of course he writes his own stuff, but he's also in charge of composing and producing his own beats and instrumentals, and he's also in charge of polishing and putting the final touches on his cover arts, among other things. So let's talk about all of his projects. I'm going to be talking about, ranking, and rating all of his albums, his one mixtape, and his one EP. So starting off, Tyler, the Creator's worst project is Goblin. It's Goblin. I know that's gonna hurt some of the old school niche Tyler fans out there, but if I'm being honest with myself, I've just never liked this project. When I was a lot younger and I felt like I was in the target audience when this album released, I didn't like this album, and now as a more mature adult who had to go back and revisit this album once again for the point of making this video, I still don't like this album. It's meant to be this haunting, demented, twisted perception of reality as told by Tyler to his Dr. TC therapist character, before wrapping up his trilogy, which I talked about in my previous video if you don't know what trilogy I'm talking about. But honestly, this album just falls flat to me and just has never resonated with me. Even in understanding that a lot of the gross and violent lyrics on some of these songs come from that demented and mentally unwell character, I still just don't like the majority of songs. And this is still early in Tyler's career before I feel like he was able to clean up and really improve his music. My favorite songs on this album are Yonkers, She, Sandwiches, Analog, and AU79, and as for a rating on this album, I'm feeling a 3 out of 10. Next up, we have Bastard, Tyler's first major project released in 2009. This project also has some wild lyrics, but ultimately I love the instrumental so much more, and I really like some of the guest appearances like Earl Sweatshirt and Casey Veggies. There isn't much else for me to say about this project, but if you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend you do so, as I think it's important to understanding Tyler's early work, and some of the highlights on this thing will genuinely stick with you. My favorite songs on this project are 7, Odd Toddlers, and The Joint with Earl. As for a rating, I'm feeling a 5 out of 10 for Bastard. Next up, Cherry Bomb. This is the album that changed everything. On one hand, you have some people who think this is the greatest album since the days of sound, and on the other hand, you have some people who think this is irredeemably awful and Tyler's worst attempt at putting something together. This project sounds like Tyler locked himself in a room for a month straight and the mix of sounds that came out were packaged into one complete album. It has the loud, chaotic, and sometimes annoying version of Tyler, his braggadocious rap style, and also the more traditional, musically inclined style of Tyler. This album has some of his best songs of all time, like Effing Young Perfect, Find Your Wings, and Smuckers, but also has some songs that I really think hold this project back, like Okaga and Blow My Load. I think the title track does well in representing this project, since on one hand at the start, you have this really loud and abrasive sound that literally gives me a headache every time I listen to it, but there's also this beautiful little moment where Tyler goes back and forth singing with Sid of the internet, and I literally come back to this song because of that one passage, and it's so good. Tyler's a fan of moments, and while that's clearly evident on all of his projects, it's mostly clear on Cherry Bomb since it has some of his all-time moments. My favorite songs on Cherry Bomb are Find Your Wings, Two-Seater, Brown Stains, Effing Young Perfect, and Smuckers. As for a rating, I think this album is a 7 out of 10. Now we have Tyler's first and only EP released in 2018 to be alongside the animated Grinch movie. I remember when Tyler's single came out in promotion for that movie, but somehow I just never listened to this full EP and some of the other stuff that he recorded for the soundtrack until this video. This short little project is amazing, honestly. The whole thing is kind of funny because he really didn't need to go so hard for a project geared towards an animated kids movie, but he did. Projects like this allow me to appreciate the full scope of his artistry and how it can be applied in any context. My favorite songs on this EP are I Am the Grinch, Mr. Grinch, You Are a Mean One, Big Bag, and When the Gloves Come Off, and as for a rating, I think this EP is an 8 out of 10. Now we're at Tyler's best 4 albums in my opinion. I don't think it's an incredibly harsh opinion or hot take to have these 4 as his best, but here we are. I think these are all amazing and displays of his best work to date. First, we have Wolf, what many consider to be Tyler's best piece of work. Definitely one of the modern classic hip-hop albums we got from the 2010s. This is when a lot of people became a fan of Tyler's music and started to see the vision in his artistry amongst his still young and chaotic energy in that era. This album features a cool concept story from start to finish amongst the Theorized trilogy, in which I talked about in my previous video, so again, if you haven't watched that, please feel free to do so. I feel like one of the things that holds this album back for me is that young and chaotic energy that feels like it was left over from Goblin. Songs like Domo 23, Trash Wang, and Tamale, which I actually love Tamale and Domo 23 is fine. I just wish this album took the story a bit more seriously, but that's just what you got with Tyler back in the day. And it's funny because some of those moments on some of those songs are actually helpful towards the narrative. I just don't like some of the songs, or some of the parts of them at least. I also think this album features Tyler's worst 10th track on Party Isn't Over, Campfire, and Beamer, even though Beamer is necessary for the narrative. With that said, you have some of his best saddest songs of all time in Answer and Lone. You have potentially some of his best writing and rapping ever on Rusty, and although he hates when people say this, he also has his stand moment on Colossus. And not to mention some great all-time cuts for me, like songs like 48 and Tree Home 95. My favorite songs on this project are 48, Rusty, Slater, and Tree Home 95, and as for a rating, I'm feeling it 8 out of 10 for Wolf. Now we have Call Me If You Get Lost, Tyler's most recent album and one of the more memorable experiences so far in this new decade. This era of Tyler has been an absolute pleasure to be a part of, and this album has been great since its release. This album was my soundtrack of 2021, and I feel like it represents luxury rap at its finest. And while for Tyler that represents many expensive items and trips to places that are hard for some people to pronounce,
it's called great music. It's called albums that you actually hear the songs, not no mysterious shit.
For others, it represents some of the subtleties in life. I traveled to as many places as I was safely able to last year. I listened to and experienced a lot of great music last year. I ate a lot of amazing meals, and I got to experience it a lot with the people that I loved last year. So last year was a luxurious year for me. This album also features a tight narrative of what we know to be a true story between Tyler, his guy friend, and his guy friend's girlfriend, who both men seem to be interested in this love triangle. Tyler's on top of the world on some of these songs, almost quite literally, but other times he's begging for someone to stay with him and comfort him, since he knows these rich materialistic things won't last forever and don't offer him that everyday peace that he's searching for. Perhaps best expressed on a song like Rise, where at the end of the song he's chanting, "Please don't go, please just stay," while in the background he's also yelling, "Nobody can fuck with me," a plea for help hidden behind a braggadocious rap persona. Also, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet, but this album brings back all the memories I had as a young hip-hop listener growing up on Gangsta Grill's mixtapes. Whether it be Stone Mountain by Childish Gambino, the Dedication mixtape series by Lil Wayne, and all the other songs and projects that I heard DJ Drama on, seeing a modern version of that being captained by Tyler the Creator is such an important moment for hip-hop. And you can really tell Tyler cares about this genre no matter how many times he's able to make music in alternative lanes. Tyler's rapping on this project is top tier, the production is top tier, and every moment in between is amazing as well. My favorite songs on this project are Corso, What's Your Name, Run It Up, Rise, Juggernaut, and Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance, and as for a rating, I'm feeling a 9 out of 10 on this album. And now we have Flower Boy, an era that seems to be trademarked by Tyler fans who deem it taboo to have discussions around this album. What Cherry Bomb started in a shift of sound, Flower Boy sought out and fulfilled, thus causing a divide within Tyler's fan base. While some miss that hard, gritty, and just rebellious old sound that Tyler had, others really like this new change up in sound and welcome this album with open arms. As someone who had been listening to Tyler for a while, I love this change of pace on this album. And although I loved and still love some of his old stuff, this album was when I knew he might go down as one of the hip hop greats. I know I talk a lot about Tyler's production style and his instrumentals, but this is the album where I could literally sit down and listen to these instrumentals on loop all day. There's so many subtleties hidden and layered within each instrumental, and just like I was talking about how Tyler loves moments on his album, this album has plenty of moments. I love the aesthetics of this album, the colors that it gives off with some of the sounds, and the narrative themes, and how that affects Tyler as he explores his sexuality and what that means for his love life, his friendship, and how he uses his fame and materialism to escape all of this. Something we see him continuing on the project I just talked about, Call Me If You Get Lost. The transitions on this album are great because not only do they make sense in a literal sense like you're used to whenever you hear the word transition in music, but lyrically these songs continue and build on one another as well, which is something I've come to appreciate with Tyler's music. This album is a tight 14 tracks and runs just under 50 minutes, and I love that because it's good for a casual listen as well as an in-depth, intense listen. Whether you're a fan of Tyler's old work or you're a new fan just trying to get into his music, I definitely think this album is a necessary listen, and I think this album is perfection. Not to mention, this is one of the coldest album covers of all time. My favorite tracks on this album are Where This Flower Blooms, See You Again, Pothole, Boredom, I Ain't Got Time, 911, November, and Enjoy Right Now Today. As for a rating, I think this album is a 10 out of 10. And now we're here at what many, including myself, believe to be Tyler's magnum opus. One of the things I appreciate about great artists in music is how they're able to outdo themselves time and time again. After the great commercial success of Flower Boy, a lot of people were wondering what direction Tyler was going to take his next project in, especially since we knew he was so comfortable going outside of his old rap styles, and man did he deliver with Igor. I often like to refer to Flower Boy as Diet Igor, since Tyler took what he did on Flower Boy and expounded on it even more with Igor. A masterclass of production, vocal pitching, and a great use of hidden features make this album as strong as it is. As Tyler also tends to do with his creative mind, he manages to tie in a cohesive, well-flowing narrative into this project as well. It's one where Tyler's involved in a love triangle where Tyler is in love with this man, but the man isn't really committed to being in a relationship with Tyler, so the man chooses a woman instead. Igor explains the feelings of Tyler's perspective in falling in love, being infatuated and having this obsessive, unhealthy amount of love, falling out of love, moving on, and trying to be okay with it. This album features one of his most successful hits in Earthquake featuring Playboi Carti, one of the cooler fan favorite songs in New Magic Wand, what I believe is his best song ever in Gone Gone Thank You, but some people think A Boy's a Gun is his best song ever, which just further proves how great this album is. Perhaps his best intro and outro with Igor's theme and Are We Still Friends, and also some great cuts all in between this album. My favorite songs are Igor's theme, Earthquake, I Think, Running Out of Time, and Gone Gone Thank You, but you know I love this whole track list. As for a rating, this album is a 10 out of 10 and one of the best albums of the 21st century. So that's it for this video. What are some of your favorite Tyler albums, songs, or just moments like I talked about in this video? Let me know in the comments while also letting me know how you would rank his discography if you want. Thank you for watching. It's a lot of fun talking about my favorite artists at length and some of my favorite projects by them, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to show support, and until next time. I also think this album features Tyler's worst 10th track. I sound like Corday. Okay, I don't know why I was getting that text, sorry. Because I just remembered I have one more video to film after this. And I don't want it to be like, I'm all out of battery, sad Bob. You know what I'm saying?